Very much. Oh, thank you. I do need that. Okay. Sound check okay? Okay. You heard my name. I'm sorry I speak only English, so this presentation will be in English. What I'd like to talk about is Control M21. This is a new version that was introduced about 2 months ago. There are many, many new capabilities. I will describe some of them. But what I really would like to accomplish in my description of Control M21 is give you some insight or background why we decided to release or to provide the capabilities that you see in the product. And so I will try to describe to you what each capability or set of capabilities we believe contributes to helping what I think you have been hearing today about modernization, transformation, and all of the major changes that are going on in technology today. So, I'm going to ask you a few questions. I hope you will be able to answer by a show of hands. How many companies here are using or thinking about using public cloud? Quite a number. Good. How many organizations have teams that are working on data-intensive applications, analytics, business intelligence, ETL in a cloud environment? Show of hands? Some. What we are hearing from every company is that, again, I think what you have heard earlier today, I hope, I was listening to translation, so I hope I got it right. Every organization today is focused on new capabilities, modernizing their services, responding to customer requests, responding to competitive pressures, and moving at a far greater speed to deliver these new services than ever before. So what you see here behind me are some of the challenges that every organization tells us they are faced with. Having to be able to respond more quickly by using new technology. From a Control M perspective, in order to be able to use that technology, Control M has to be able to integrate with it. And so one of the key characteristics of being able to absorb and to master the complexity resulting from new technology is to be able to orchestrate workloads that run and make use of that technology. What we are also hearing from every company is that there are new requirements from users outside of IT. Teams that are creating and building these new applications, possibly partners, possibly business analysts, they want to get access to Control M much more quickly and with much less friction and manual interaction than ever before. And so Control M21 extends or continues the evolution that you have seen in Control M for the last several major releases. I guess we have a mixed audience, so maybe one more question. How many of you here either are using or are familiar with Control M? Okay. For those of you who are not, Control M is an automation solution that manages business workflows. This is what we have been doing for the last several decades. And the world today is getting more and more complicated than ever before. I skipped ahead a little bit, but that's okay. So, Control M as a solution provides a single, what we talk about as a layer of abstraction, a single pane of glass that lets you manage workload regardless of whether it is running on mainframe, distributed systems, today, cloud, containerization, data, whatever you have as an organization, Control M provides a way to manage it. In order to maintain that, we have to be able to expand what we support much more quickly than we ever have before, and Control M 21 is focused on doing that. In this idea of expanding the framework, we have introduced in Control M 21 support for something called airflow. Maybe another question. Anyone here familiar with airflow? For those of you who are not, you certainly will soon. It has become a de facto standard for data pipelines. As you heard earlier, if your organization is doing AI or ML or any of the new modern data stack applications, chances are those development teams either are already or want to use Airflow. And it is limited to data, and those data teams require access to the rest of the enterprise. And so we have provided integration with Airflow to allow you to bring into your end-to-end view any applications that are being created by data teams and that they are using Airflow integration. We are providing support for cloud much more quickly than we have ever been before in terms of new services, and I'll talk a little bit about that. We have created a dedicated integrations team that is delivering new integrations every single month. And if any of you are using our managed file transfer solution, we have expanded the cloud storage that is supported by MFT to include not only Amazon, but also Azure or AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud Storage. For Airflow integration, again, this has become a de facto standard in the data orchestration space. And companies that have teams building new data applications frequently require to make those new applications either dependent on or predecessors to more traditional business applications. And so being able to support integration with Airflow has become an important requirement. And here are just some screenshots to show you how Control M, how it looks when Control M runs what we call an Airflow DAG. A DAG in Airflow is equivalent roughly to a folder in Control M. For cloud storage, as I mentioned, we have expanded what managed file transfer supports to include Azure, and specifically in Azure, not only blob storage, but data lake storage, which is a flavor of blob storage. And we have added support for Google Cloud Storage, which is new in Control M21, was not available before. And even in the AWS world, even though we have supported S3 for quite a long time, we have expanded that capability and added support for something called private link. AWS Private Link is a way to consume or use S3 storage without exposing the traffic to the public internet. Again, something very important in this time when security has become so important to customers. As far as the integrations that I mentioned, so here you see we actually, sorry, I'm in the way, but that's all the way in January, not that important. Every single month, 2 to 3 new integrations. I see that this slide became a little messy because we're trying to pack in an entire year. We will have to redesign it. If you have been around Control M and you have watched how we introduced what we call control modules in the past, it was maybe 1 every year, 2 if we were lucky. The pace was much, much slower. Today, what we are hearing from customers is that their cloud vendors are providing new services at a very, very quick rate, and they need to be able to orchestrate those or include that in business workflows with Control M. And so we have responded to this. Most of these services are cloud services, but many are third-party services. And this focus on cloud is something that we believe will continue not only in the way we provide support for it, but the adoption of cloud in the industry is continuing at a very, very quick pace. Not only are we providing new integration, but we are also building in foundational capabilities so that cloud authentication is built in, so we do not have to reinvent it every time we provide support for new integration. In every cloud, they have their own version, of course, which makes life hard for vendors like us. AWS has something called IAM roles. And Azure has something called managed identities. And Google Cloud has something called service accounts. But these are all very similar functionally, and their intent is for you to be able to manage security of applications without the application having to provide credentials. So if you are familiar with the way Control M operates with other applications today, you have to provide usually what we call a connection profile, a username and password, or some other version of credentials, and Control M has to manage those credentials. That is not only a burden, but frequently not an ideal situation as far as the security folks are concerned in your organization. By providing support for the cloud authentication, Control M does not have to present credentials. It could simply inherit the credentials of a virtual machine that the agent is running on. Makes security a much, much simpler process for Control M. The other category, or second category, I didn't get a chance to talk about too much, was to increase operational efficiency, because there is never a time that anyone in IT has ever told us, we have lots of money, we can spend as much as we want. Every single year, there's constant pressure to become more efficient, to reduce costs, to do more, and so that is a permanent part of what we deliver with Control M. One of the capabilities is support for SAML. SAML has become the de facto standard for security integration. If your organization is using single sign-on with tools like Okta or Auth0 or maybe Azure AD, and there are quite a number of others, they will probably want to be able to include Control M in that sort of portal of applications. In order to do that, we have to provide support for SAML 2.0. Functionally very similar to integration with with Active Directory or AD. And in Control M21, you have the option to use both. But this is yet another capability that is in direct response to organizations that are asking for adopting or being able to align with their standard security policies, because security has become so important to every organization. We have added the ability to reference folders. We have done this for a couple of different reasons. Let's say you have a job or a set of jobs that are included in many different workflows. It's very common that you may have a daily, a monthly, a weekly, and all of these flows have certain jobs in them that run, and they are the same jobs. Today, you would have multiple instances of each job in every folder. With folder reference, you can build a folder that contains those common jobs and then refer to them from wherever you need. The benefit, of course, is you can significantly reduce the number of elements that you have to maintain. And if you ever have to change them, you change it in one place instead of having to change it many. But there's another important characteristic. I mentioned this idea of more and more people or users outside of the traditional Control M users that desire access to Control M. And that access is not only to use it, but to build jobs, test them, maybe build them in different ways using JSON or a Python client. You want to allow them to build and test and even maybe run their jobs on their own, but sometimes you need to include those jobs in some kind of a more traditional enterprise workflow. With this capability, that makes it very easy to do. We have added the ability to program or to define if actions, what we call post-processing, based on variables, and variables that can change dynamically. Again, what we have seen, especially in more modern applications, certainly there are more and more cyclic jobs, but there is also information that may be drawn from outside of Control M, and they want to be able to influence Control M decisions on the basis of that external information. This capability allows you to define in your post-processing or to test the value of a variable which may change dynamically and then take different action depending on that value. Again, a capability that makes it easier for people who are non-traditional Control M users to be able to use Control M and build the workflows. Here are some examples. I will just skip them very quickly. This is an example of the SAML configuration, how you define job and folder reference, and variables. Okay. I'm getting close to the end of my time, so I am rushing a little bit. There's a separate session on file transfer, and so I will leave most of this for that separate session, but there are lots of different capabilities that have been added to file transfer because the idea of cloud, there's one more question I would like to ask, but we don't have time, but I can tell you, in other audiences, it is very, very common that customers are using not just one cloud, but several. And the ability to move data among all of their locations, multiple public clouds, on-prem environments, third-party hosted sites, and to be able to move this easily, this is a very important capability. And so file transfer has actually become even more important than it has ever been before. So again, there's just a number of capabilities I just don't have time to discuss because I want to get to the last topic I want to leave with, and that is the discussion of web and site standards. I'll leave that for now. Get the last category of collaboration and working with people outside of IT. I will ask this question. Of the users of Control M, how many of you are using the web interface? A few. Anyone who is not using the web interface, I will very strongly encourage you to use it. Because in the future, we don't know when exactly, but in the future it will become the only graphical user interface. This is extremely important for us. We have been evolving and enhancing the web UI over the last several major releases. If you haven't looked at it in the past, I urge you to look at it at least in whatever version you have today, but certainly in Control M21. As we are seeing this requirement to push Control M to other people in the organization, what we talk about sometimes as democratizing Control M, the web interface is that interface that is most used, most desired by people outside of IT. Go to any developer carrying their Mac and ask them to use our Windows workload automation client. It will not be a happy conversation. And the market has decided the standard graphical user interface is a web browser. You may like it or you may not, but that is very clearly the decision of the market. And so we have been investing very heavily in moving functionality into the web UI. And much of the new capabilities that we are adding appears only in the web UI and nowhere and not in the workload automation client. Another really, really important capability is site standards. I have so many questions, but no time to ask. For those of you who may not be familiar, it is part of a component we call Workload Change Manager. But it is really important because, again, when you have users who are casual users, they may build Control M jobs once in a while, every few months, maybe even longer. They're not familiar with the syntax, especially the syntax that is specific to your organization. And every organization has their own unique standards. Site standards is the capability that allows you to code and define those site standards and have Control M implement and enforce them for you automatically. So that when an engineer who is not familiar with Control M defines a job, whether they do it graphically or whether they do it through JSON and automation API, or whether they use the new Python client, they will be instructed what is correct and acceptable syntax and what is not. In Control M21, we added a capability called site standard policies. In standards today, a single site standard is associated with a folder. We have customers who have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of site standards. And anywhere from 50 to 90% of every standard is exactly the same. Of course, you can immediately see the challenge. If they need to change something, the maintenance burden can be significant. We have added in Control M21 something called standards policies which allow you to apply multiple site standards based on a filter that will then all together apply to instruct someone how to create a job. And there's many, many other capabilities and details in policy, but that is the major one, that you can have several. And what you can then do is have a single site standard that may be defined as the fundamental capabilities or syntax for every single job type in your organization. And then later on top, as many additional standards as are required for different sections of the job, for different applications, for different platforms that will apply when necessary so that you still get the same result, but the maintenance is significantly lighter. And so, again, I have just touched on what are really a lot of different capabilities. I would urge you to look at the release notes, download and test it if you haven't already done so. Certainly, I would be happy to have additional sessions to maybe focus on specific areas of interest. But Control M21 is a really major area of capability and represents a significant step forward in the evolution of Control M for modern environments that are having to face dealing with cloud and DevOps and data and microservices and all of the new modern things that are now entering every single organization. So thank you very much. I've run out of time, but I'll be around if you would like to discuss any of that. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Perfect time.